There are 5 carnivore foods that I'll never eat again due to the fact that they have harmful compounds in them. Since removing these from my diet, I have noticed that I've felt a lot better. I think many of these will surprise you. Let's get into the first one. Farmed chicken. Some of the practices behind farmed chicken are unbelievable and they have significant health effects on us. Farmed chicken are fed grains in the form of pellets. Now the problem with this is that it's not their species appropriate diet. So when they eat this stuff, they're not able to break this down effectively and it ends up accumulating in their flesh, in particular in their fat. When we examine the fatty acid profile of farmed chicken, we find that it is very high in omega-6 fatty acids and very low in omega-3 fatty acids. In particular, there is this one fatty acid called linoleic acid, which is incredibly inflammatory to humans. Now, another problem with farmed chicken, which is worse depending on which nation you're from, is that they are pumped with both hormones and antibiotics. Now, the reason they're given antibiotics is that because their diet is so poor, some of them end up sick. And the reason they're given these hormones is so they grow faster and grow bigger. That's why when you go to the supermarket nowadays, you see these massive chicken breasts that look very unnatural. Now, what effects are these drugs having on us? Well, very little is known, and that right there is the problem. But as we see with virtually everything related to health, as soon as we deviate something from how it's naturally meant to be, it does end up causing a lot of problems for us. Now, to make matters worse with farmed chicken is that because their living conditions are so horrible, they end up stress eating their own feces. For me personally, I started to avoid chicken simply because it just didn't taste as good to me as, say, ruminant meat, such as beef or lamb. To get around this issue, it's probably a good idea to get pasture-raised chicken. But to tell you the truth, I think this is the least unhealthy food on this list, so you don't need to avoid it at all costs. I personally just avoid it simply because it is no longer appealing to me. Now, the next one, which honestly I think should be a crime against humanity, is supermarket sausages. I looked at the ingredients of a packet of one of these things the other day, and I saw it is only 62% meat, so 38% of it is other additives. It's almost impressive how they can make it so no one notices it. It's not far off half the sausage being other things, yet people still buy it and somehow it still tastes good. The problem with these additives is that lots of them are quite literally lab-made chemicals. And even the more natural hormones, such as soy, have a massive impact on your hormone levels. Soy is ridiculously high in a compound called phytoestrogens, which mimics estrogen in the body. Now, estrogen is essentially the feminine hormone, so when men consume this, they are feminized.
Paul, where is the research showing soy consumption has feminizing effects in men? Soy does not have any feminizing effects in men. If soy is feminizing, then show me the f***ing evidence, Paul.
And when women consume this, it just puts all their hormones out of whack and they get very emotional. The solution to this is just to be careful if you are going to have sausages. The third carnivore food that I'll never consume again is farmed salmon. Now, many people think that salmon is a superfood, which it is if it's wild, but farmed salmon is incredibly toxic. For starters, they're also fed these grains that they cannot break down and it ends up accumulating in their flesh. They're also given the antibiotics and the hormones, but there are another 2 things they do to farm salmon which you'll have a hard time believing. The first is that because their diets are so nutritionally void, they give them these grains which basically are just filled with garbage. They literally end up coming out as a white fish. Now, as we all know, salmon is meant to be orange. So what they do is they have to supplement their feed with a synthetic version of what is known as astaxanthin. Now, wild salmon get this because when they're in the oceans, they get to eat their species-appropriate diet and they eat things that contain natural astaxanthin. But the farm salmon, they get a synthetic version of this. And to make matters worse, what they sometimes do is they literally paint their flesh with food dye afterwards.
Many unscrupulous processors attempt to deepen the color of salmon flesh by painting the fillets with a red food-grade dye during the processing stage. Predictably, when thawed and cooked, the dye simply runs off, leaving the flesh permeated with unhealthy chemicals.
It's genuinely insane. The beautiful orange salmon that you see in your supermarket is fake. But that's not all. The absolute worst part about farmed salmon is that they have now started to genetically modify it. No, I'm not joking. They literally get the DNA from an eel and paste it into the salmon.
These fish, all sterile females, are genetically engineered. 30 years ago, scientists spliced in a growth hormone gene from Pacific Chinook salmon, which are hardier, more voracious eaters. They also added a so-called promoter gene from ocean poutfish, which turns the growth gene on.
The reason for this is, well, so it can grow bigger and larger with less food. So as with all of these things that are poisoning the population, it is for profit. Now, this has only become a thing recently, so for most parts of the world, you won't have to deal with the genetically modified salmon, but you still will have all of those other issues. The solution to this is just to have wild salmon, but unfortunately, where I'm from in New Zealand, it is very hard to find that. It's actually really sad how they do this, because who doesn't love salmon? But unfortunately, that's what happens when you have all of these companies optimizing for profit. The next carnivore food that I avoid is store-bought beef jerky. Now, this is for the same reasons that I avoid the supermarket sausages. It's just filled with a bunch of other garbage. Often this beef jerky is teriyaki flavored, which means the sauce is usually soy-based. So because I don't want to be a soy boy like some of these vegans, I make sure to avoid it. Now, I did find a solution for this. I went out and bought one of those big dehydrator things. The only problem was that it just tasted ridiculously good. Take a look at that. Doesn't she look beautiful? And yeah, literally just like that. Now for the most important part, a taste test. Spectacular. So what I'd find is I'd make a massive batch and I'd consume it in like a day or two, and I'd end up eating just a ridiculous amount of food, which, I mean, considering it's meat, it wasn't the end of the world, but still, it was just so addictive, so I've kind of stopped making that too. I wanted to let you all know that I've written an ebook, which is a complete beginner's guide on the carnivore diet. It's only 17 pages long and it covers everything you need to know. All you have to do is head down to the description of this video, click the top link, and I'll send it to you for free. But I mean, if you are someone who loves beef jerky, investing in one of those dehydrators is an incredible investment. The final food I've gotten rid of is milk, but it's not for the reasons you might think. The main problem most people have with milk is that it causes weight gain. Milk is high in carbohydrates, which causes your blood sugar to spike significantly. As a result of this, another hormone called insulin elevates to bring your blood sugar levels back down. Problem with this is that as insulin elevates, it blocks another hormone called leptin, which's job is essentially to say to your brain, hey, we're full, we can stop eating now. But for me, my more personal problem was that it just wrecked my skin. Every time I drank milk, my skin would just break out. In fact, if you watch some of my older videos, you can see every now and then I have a bit of a breakout on my face. The problem with milk lies in the pasteurization process, where they heat it to high temperatures so that it is able to stay shelf stable for longer. But what happens is that as it's heated up, the proteins denature and they become inflammatory. Now this can cause inflammation, which is why many people experience joint pain when they consume dairy. Now, if I consumed raw dairy, I could avoid this problem. However, for me, because of where I live, it's very hard to find it. So unfortunately, I just don't consume milk or consume very small amounts of it. The thing with all of these carnivore foods, however, is that they're still much better for you than consuming some other garbage. So just because I personally don't consume them, it doesn't mean you have to completely avoid them. The other day, I went back and forth with AI, and I convinced it to tell the people the truth about the carnivore diet, which I'll link to right here. Subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.